Okie dokie. Should be live now. Dropping a lot of frames again. Get over it. Let me know how things sound and look and blah 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 blah. Hey yo, everything looking good? I'm still getting into stuff. Cool. Now I got the chat up. Looks good so far? Okay. Because it says I'm dropping a lot of frames. Then again, I'm not doing anything on screen right now. But if you can hear me, that's what counts. Oh, let me go post about this in another server. Oh, Thor, pretty baby, don't jump up here. Cool, cool, cool. Okay. Guess I'm not gonna post on Twitter. So I'll just wait another minute or two in case anyone else wants to jump in. I'm trying to think if there's any other servers I could post it in. Because I joined some new servers lately, but I don't know if they're the right ones. Nah, I think the two I promoted in is fine. It's all good. I'm going to keep talking so you can tell me if the sound suddenly starts acting up or something. Just going to give it till about the 5-minute mark before I do shit. Okie dokie. I said I'm going to start talking, then I immediately stopped talking. That's how it goes. Oh, hey. Does it show that purple icon? Is that new? The purple little icon next to my thing where like the status icon goes to show that I'm in streaming mode? Neat. On Discord, if that wasn't clear. Because I was thinking about changing my status on Discord, but if it shows that little purple thingy... Yeah. Cool. Okay. A couple of weeks, that's not bad. I thought you were about to say, yeah, it's been there for fucking ever. Fucking dumbass. But if it's a couple of weeks, I haven't... God, when was the last time I did this? It might have been a couple of weeks since I last streamed. But not very long then. Cool. So I haven't missed it for a very long time. But that's neat. Nice little status update. To be like, bitch, I'm playing something. Don't bother me. So. Oh, I know somewhere else I can post this. I have a group chat. Cool. Why do I never want to burp until I get on stream? Then it's like, you have so much gas ready to be burped out. I am a joy to hear talk. Cool. Okie dokie, it's been about 5 minutes. Do you guys need a refresher? I see you guys. It's just you, Cal. Cal, do you need a refresher? It's been a bit. It has been a hot minute. And I don't think... You haven't read much, right? I think you read a little bit, but I think you've been mainly following the streams. Those shrugs. Do you need a recap or not? We don't have to have one. I just know that it's been a bit. So I'm giving the option. Mainly following the streams. Yeah. I need to stream more often, especially if I start to actually write more and do more than one chapter a week, unlike the past couple of weeks. But hey, I got another chapter out today, and I was not sure I'd make it this week, so that's good. Because today's Wednesday. Fuck. God, today's just Wednesday. Time moves so slow and so fast. Okay. Then yeah, I'm gonna say that we don't need a recap. We should be pretty good. I mean, you should be able to catch up with what's going on. It hasn't been that long. So okay, we're on Bondless Prince, Bloodless Night, Chapter 23, Surprises on Patrol. Summary. Change comes to Skaya. Yeah, and I have a little art towards the end for you. They were back on the road again, after a night at the inn of one of the few small towns on the way to Prospect. Aradia had spent most of the previous day talking about Skyan history and the history of the continent, really, which was interesting enough, but Karkat had practically had to twist her arm to convince her to go to her room and let them both sleep last night. She was perky again this morning, but so far fairly quiet during the past couple of hours of the ride, which was fine because they still had several more until they reached the road branching off to the area Aradia was set to study next, and then Karkat was on his own. Despite his complaints of patrol being boring, this was the sort of calm he needed. The cooling breeze of the changing season ruffled his hair and the sun sank deep in his bones, recharging him from the stress of the past few weeks. Aradia smiled at him, and he found himself easily smiling back. Yeah, this was exactly what he needed. Dirk wasn't avoiding Rose. He was just busy. He had to make up the missed petitions from the previous day, then meet with his agricultural advisors, as well as the nobles who owned the largest amounts of farmland. Meanwhile, some of the minor nobles had noticed Cervantes wasn't with him this week and kept insisting on pestering him, and somehow a glare from their ruler wasn't as effective at scaring them off as one from his guard, despite their increase in stutters. It annoyed him, but it also kept him from focusing on Roxy, which he appreciated. The fact that it also kept him from even taking his meals with Rose was happenstance. He was busy. The breeze was getting colder, and he couldn't feel the sun on his face anymore. Where had those clouds come from? Had he spaced out while riding? Surely more than an hour or two hadn't passed. Aradia was still smiling, humming to herself, but Karkat was put on edge. Then there was a soft chittering. High, then guttural. The bushes and small trees lining the road moved against the wind. Karkat held up a hand silently, and Aradia saw it and stopped her cart. He put a hand on the sword strapped to his hip. The shrubbery shook violently one last time as a fox burst into the open, dashing across the road in front of them. Karkat let out a sigh he didn't realize he was holding and chuckled. Then the chittering got louder, and their horses reared back in fright, their training seeming to be the only thing keeping them from bolting. Karkat looked wildly around them and saw a dozen little humanoid creatures, colored black and purplish red, with small fangs lining their gaping mouths, emerging from the shadows. Imps. Imps from the depths of the liminal forests over 20 miles into Skaya. Karkat unsheathed his falchion and slashed down at the imps and saw Aradia pull out a whip and lash it at the one surrounding her cart. Its reach gave her an advantage he didn't have, so he swatted away a few immediately under him and hopped off his horse to get into the thick of things. Two charged him at once, but a swift swipe of his blade had them bursting into putrid ash and smoke. Aradia seemed to have taken care of a couple as well, and the rest seemed to be a bit more cautious about approaching either of them. Karkat watched and waited for them to make a move, then heard a sound behind him and turned just in time to put his arm up to block an imp that had snuck around. Its dagger-sharp teeth sank into his arm, and he cried out, shaking it wildly until Aradia snapped out with her whip and turned it to smoke. "Thanks," Karkat said between coughs. She didn't respond as her whip lashed out to another one coming at him, but the thing dodged. Karkat struck out with the sword and got it instead, then swept out to get another 2 in 1 that were rushing at him. 2 more launched themselves at Aradia on her cart, and Karkat took care of one while she took care of the other. The last 2 imps looked at each other and melded into a shadow and scurried away, but Karkat was faster. He launched himself forward and slammed his heels and sword down on the darkness, and was soon covered in the ash that exploded from their demise. Karkat coughed some more and dusted himself off. "As fun as that was," Aradia said, "I don't think that bodes well." Karkat shook his head. "We have to go back. His Majesty has to know. Come on, Aradia, if we hurry back now, we can make it to the inn before nightfall and set off before daybreak in the morning." He swung himself back up on his horse and turned it around, but Aradia stayed still. "I'm not going back." He looked at her, eyes bugging. "What do you mean? We have to go back." "I'm going to the dig site. It's where I need to be, and I can warn them about this in case there are any more in the area. And without waiting on me, you'll get there faster." "Aradia!" "You go, Karkat. We each have our duties." Karkat shifted in his saddle. "I should at least go with you to the site. Make sure you're okay." She smirked at that. "I can take care of myself. Your duty doesn't lie with me." Karkat hesitated, then nodded. "Be safe, Aradia." "You too, Karkat." Then Karkat dug his heels into his horse and set off at a gallop back toward the castle. The next 2 days had gone much like the last, with meetings and paperwork and worrying and trying not to worry. There was no point when there was nothing he could do, and Dirk had to make sure his kingdom would be fed during the barren season. That was what was important, as tedious as the work was. It was late when he finally returned to his room, having had to stay well past nightfall to finish up his train of thought that kept getting interrupted by nuisances. 4 days of not having Cervantes around seemed to embolden them after the week with him here. Probably trying to get in their requests before he got back. Of all things, he didn't expect to be looking forward to having the knight's eyes boring into the back of his head again. Dirk had just changed into his sleepwear and was about to finally climb into bed when he heard a commotion echoing down the halls outside. A shout and the thumps of something hitting the wall paired with heaving footsteps. Was that supposed to be heaving, or was that supposed to be heavy? Running on the stone floor. Dirk grabbed the sword by his bed and cautiously peeked into the hallway. It was Cervantes, panting, covered in sweat and blood and what looked like ash. As soon as his eyes laid on Dirk, he collapsed to his knees and hands. "Physician! Get a physician!" Dirk called as he dropped his sword and sprinted the last few steps to his guard. Vantus did his best to straighten up as Dirk squatted before him. Now let's see. That drawing I made. Whenever it loads. It's Karkat. He's fine. He's fine. "Majesty," he said. Then he coughed, more of that dark soot coating his hands as he did so. "What happened?" Karkat wheezed a few more breaths. Dirk grabbed the knight's shoulders. "Cervantes, who attacked you? Are they here? Are they coming?" Vantus shook his head. "Got them. Every last motherfucking pointy little gremlin I saw," he said between coughs. Dirk's eyebrows creased. "Gremlin? What are you talking about?" "Imps, Majesty. Imps in Skya. Dozens, hundreds, I don't know. I got them all." Each short phrase he came with another hack of black material. Dirk's hands tightened on Vantus's arms reflexively, but he relaxed at the knight's wince and let him go. Someone was running down the hall toward him. A physician, he hoped. "Imps? Are you sure?" Vantus choked out a laugh and gestured to himself. "I'm pretty fucking sure, Your Majesty." The physician was in sight and quickly made her way to Vantus's side. The knight brushed her off. "I'm fine. Tired. Need sleep." She frowned at him. "I'll be the judge of how fine you are, thank you. Let's go get you cleaned up." Dirk stood as the physician helped Vantus to his feet. "Keep me updated on his status," he said. "I'm fine," his guard growled. "Will do," the physician said. Dirk watched them walk off, Vantus leaning heavily on the physician, and his mind reeled at the implications. Rose. He had to tell Rose. As though he had summoned her, he saw her round the corner and walked swiftly toward him. He met her in the middle. "What's going on?" she asked, worry etched on her face. "Imps. Vantus was attacked by imps. A lot of them." Her eyebrows shot up. "Are you sure?" "He was covered in their ash, choking on it. Pretty fucking sure," he quoted. "That is troubling." Dirk raised his eyebrows as if to say, "No fucking shit," but she was too lost in thought to notice. "I'll reach out to the Confederation," she finally said. "See if the princes know anything about this. Unless the imps swam the whole way, they would have had to cross over their borders." "Wouldn't it make more sense for me to reach out?" Rose smirked. "We already have somewhat of a rapport, you could say." "And I don't?" Dirk snorted. "Not like I do. Plus, you'll have your hands plenty full with everything else that needs to be taken care of." Dirk wanted to argue, but she was right. He had to contact the border guards, send missives to the manors on the outskirts, see if he could borrow forces from the ones closer to the capital. The list went on. "Fine," he said. "Let me know when you hear back." "Of course. I also need to confer with the girls. They might have something to add in the morning, cousin, unless you fear the imps are at our doorstep. You need to rest." Dirk nodded absently. Rose turned to walk off, and before he could think better of it, Dirk said, "Thank you, Rose." She turned to face him fully again and smiled. "That's what family's for, Dirk. Now go to bed." Dirk just nodded again and walked back to his room and did as Rose said, going to bed but unable to sleep, instead staring at the ceiling and imagining a host of worst-case scenarios to combat. Karkat had told her he was fine, but the physician hadn't believed him until he washed off all the blood and ash to show only a handful or so of shallow cuts and bite marks scattered about his body. His cough was still terrible, but she said he just had to wait for all the ash to work its way out of his lungs. Still, despite agreeing that he was fine, she made him stay the night in the infirmary for observation. It had been a long time since anyone had fought an imp, after all, and even a tame dog's bite could turn bad in the best of circumstances. Karkat didn't have the energy to fight. He struggled out of his tight undershirt, and as soon as he put his head on the pillow, he was out like a light, the exhaustion of 2 days of battle finally consuming him. So this one, I had a hard time making sure it was clear around here that, that this and Dirk's thing here was all on the same day. And then we leave Karkat and go to Dirk, and I wanted to make it clear that that was a 2-day jump. That it had been that long since we last heard from Karkat. It's just, if you're reading over this, kind of skimming it, that might not make it clear, so I added again the days down here. And then, at the very end, the 2 days of battle, just to make it there was a shit ton of imps. He was late. But I kind of wanted that initial panic of oh shit, we left Karkat, and now it's been 2 days, and he's still talking about Karkat being gone. So, I don't know. That was kind of my struggle with this chapter. Everything else was pretty legit. Fighting the imps. Yeah. I had them turn into ash because for some reason the idea of a bunch of imp corpses just seemed wrong. But they're not going to explode into grist because this isn't in Esper. So they explode into ash. because they're just made up of darkness. And half the time I actually picture the imps when I'm writing them, and half the time I picture the Heartless from Kingdom Hearts. Just so you guys know where my brain is at with these things. But they're imps. Yeah, I guess they're part vampire too. Like, they're what I wanted to make them. So yeah, they burst into fucking ash and they meld into shadow. Because that seemed cool, okay? It seemed cool that they would meld into shadow. Because again, Kingdom Hearts is good. But yeah, this was a fun chapter. I really liked drawing Karkat so fucking out of it like that. It was a fun drawing. And yeah, this is like, oh, shit's getting serious now. Because before, like, the high stakes were like, oh no, will Karkat win a tournament? And now it's like, oh, imps are a threat. And they're a serious threat. Or they're a mysterious threat at the very least. So yeah, the plot thickens. But yeah, it was pretty legit. I like writing action heavy stuff like that. I like writing dialogue heavy stuff too. But yeah. Okie dokie. Chapter 24, Getting Personal. Quality time is spent. And oh, here's me announcing doing the recordings. Are you sure he'll be fine? Karkat rubbed his eyes, unwilling to open them yet. I've been monitoring him closely and changing his bandages as needed. Besides his cough, which is lessening, he'll be fine once he wakes up fully. He vaguely remembered being woken up a few times. That explains why his surroundings felt so off. He was in the infirmary, the memory of the night before flooding back into his waking brain. I just want to be sure. He's been through a lot, and I don't want to push him if he needs more time to heal. Karkat froze, his mind now registering the voices. That was the prince. This would have been a fantastic attitude to have a few weeks ago, but now it is unnecessary, the physician said. There was a long moment of silence. Karkat wanted to cough, but he didn't want to alert them he was awake yet. I'm sorry, Highness. That was out of... It's fine. You're right. I will do better to take your advice into account. So if you say he's fine to go out, I'll trust you. He's not ready for battle of any sort, mind you. Too exhausted, I'd wager. But if you'll just be in meetings and on horseback, there's no cause for concern. Very well. Send him to my study when he wakes. Yes, Highness. Oh, yeah. I wasn't even thinking about Buffy, but that's legit. God, I need to finish watching Buffy. I stopped at, I just, got to season 9 and then stopped. Because I just do that with TV shows. It's just like, oh yeah, just stop. I stopped Merlin. No reason. I just stopped. There was the sound of a door closing, and Karkat finally let out the cough he'd been holding back. The physician was at his side a moment later, handing him a cloth to hack into. It came away littered with black, but not as much as the previous night. Eavesdropping, are we? The physician asked, amused. Karkat shrugged sheepishly. Yes, well, you were bound to hear it eventually, since I've had to assure him you aren't on death's door ever since you stumbled in. Karkat's brow furrowed. He was here last night? She chuckled. No, all yesterday. Not surprised you don't remember it. You've been in and out, mostly out, since the night before. Karkat frowned. He didn't like losing a whole day. What else did I miss? What do you mean Buffy only had 7 seasons? I swear there were 9. I ended for the, fine, whatever the last season was is what I didn't watch. I swear that was season 9. But, again, I didn't watch it. God. Anyway, different odd number. But, yeah, whatever the last season was is the one I didn't watch. Nothing important. No imps, if that's what you're fearing. His Highness mostly just sent off notices to various nobles he'd need to meet with and spoke with his advisors. Even let his clerks do some paperwork, from what I hear. Karkat's laugh quickly turned into a cough. Yes, I'm afraid that will keep happening for another day or two. Perhaps I should commission some masks if imps are to be a real issue. She sighed. Imps in Skya, of all the strange and terrible things. They were silent for a moment, then she shook her head. Well, Prince Deodric requested you as soon as you were ready, which I'm sure you heard, so let me check you over and change your bandages one more time and you'll be good to go. Karkat nodded and let the physician prod and examine him all over. Most of his bandages didn't need to be put back on, since everything had been fairly shallow. The only thing that really irked him was his instructions not to wear his undershirt until his cough went away, just to be safe. When the examination was done, he slipped off to his room to change into something more loose and layered, then made his way to the prince's study. This is me going,
Karkat is trans. He's trans. He can't have a binder. His tight undershirt is what he has instead of a binder, because he's trans.
In case anyone couldn't pick up on that yet. There was a knock on the door to Dirk's study. Come in, he said. The door opened and in stepped Strider. Dirk stared at him. They won't let me see him, Strider said. I instructed that they make sure he rested with no interruptions. I didn't consider... How is he? He's fine. Should be out today. We'll be busy, but I can tell him... No, that's fine. He's fine. The tension left Strider's shoulder and brow as he sighed. Oh yeah, the trans Karkat thing. Yeah, it was kind of subtle the first time I kind of made mention of his tight undershirt, but yeah, I tried to be more obvious in this chapter. Like, it will become more, like, it will be blatant later on. It's just, there's nothing for me to say about it yet. Dirk wanted to say something else, but worried about breaking this... whatever it was. Strider cut him off with a look. Keep him out of trouble, Majesty. Don't fuck this up. Before Dirk could say anything else, he left. Karkat turned into the hall that led to the prince's study and smacked right into someone. He let out a shout and a grumbled, "Watch where you're going," then looked up and saw it was Dave. He tried not to beam. "You're back!" Dave smiled as he straightened his clothes back out. "So are you. Feeling okay?" Karkat's body took this question as a good time to cough, more black gunk coming out onto the cloth the physician gave him. He waved off Dave's worried look. "I'm still fine. This'll go away in a day or two. Everything else is minor." Dave hugged him tight, then released him when he started coughing again. "Sorry." Karkat waved that off too. "You're one lucky motherfucker to come out with a couple of scratches. Or unlucky for you to have gotten mobbed to begin with. I can't tell which." "How about extremely brave and talented to keep them all off me?" Karkat offered. Dave smirked. "Yeah, that too." Karkat swatted him. "What are you doing here anyway?" Dave shrugged. "Hoping to bump into you, I guess. They wouldn't let me into the infirmary." "Yeah, well, apparently I was fucking out basically all yesterday, so you didn't miss anything." "That's what I hear. The captain's worried about you, too. I'll let her know you're okay." "I'll try to see her when I can. I don't know what His Majesty has planned for me." "That makes two of us," Dave muttered. Karkat gave him a questioning look. "It's nothing. Just try not to attract any more trouble, okay?" "No promises," Karkat laughed, this time managing not to turn it into a cough. Dave clapped him on the shoulder. "Well, your liege awaits. See you around, Cat." "Bye, Dave." He watched Dave go, trying not to think about how odd it was to see him in this wing of the castle. Wasn't any of his business, he supposed. He knocked on the door to the study. "Come in," the prince said. If his voice sounded shaky, Karkat pushed that aside as well. Karkat pushed open the door and bowed. You wanted to see me, Majesty? When he straightened, he saw the prince looking at him curiously, thumbing the thin pink scar on his cheek. He looked down on the papers on his desk and straightened them absently. Yes, we have a lot to do this upcoming week. I have already sent out requests for the farther out lords to come in, or send someone who can speak on their behalf, but we can still meet with those in and around the city. He moved the stack of papers to the side and stood up. Lord Egbert will be our first stop today, so let's... Karkat's stomach let out a loud growl. He felt his face redden as he very intently looked at something on the wall rather than Prince Diedrich. Let's go get you some food. Forgive me for not taking that into consideration. Karkat just blinked at him, unsure whether he should protest, but the prince was already heading out the door, so he quickly followed behind. It was between the usual breakfast and lunch hours, so the dining hall was blessedly empty when the two showed up. A servant who was lounging in one of the chairs bolted up and bowed. Fetch us whatever the cooks have ready. Leftovers from breakfast will be fine, His Majesty said. Right away! The servant bowed again, then darted off to do as he was instructed. The prince went to the head of the table and sat, gesturing for Karkat to take the seat on his right, which Karkat did. There was an awkward silence between them, broken only by Karkat's occasional coughing. I keep forgetting to turn off my sound. Everyone's talking to me, 'cause I didn't turn off my sound. I thought I muted that fucking server. Okay, whatever. Prince Diedrich finally cleared his throat and said, So, Cervantes, how are... The servant came back with a cart loaded with food. Breads, fruits, eggs, cheeses, and hams piled high with a pitcher of watered-down wine to accompany it. The prince's lip quirked down as he looked at it, but he thanked and dismissed the servant who brought it. He loaded up his plate and Karkat followed suit, and tried not to be embarrassed when he realized how much more he grabbed than His Majesty. Karkat immediately dug in, but the prince tried again. How are you feeling? Fine, Majesty, he said. This was once again punctuated by a cough. He could not catch a break this morning. The prince frowned as he coughed and said, I was told that would go away shortly. I hope it isn't causing you too much discomfort. Karkat shook his head. I'm good for whatever you need me for, Majesty. Prince Diedrich nodded, taking a few bites of food, a far cry from the several eggs and pieces of ham Karkat had already downed. I believe I have been stealing your free time, including your day set for training tomorrow. Karkat shrugged. It's fine, Majesty. I don't wish to be your sole focus. Your duties and relationships outside of this new position are equally important, the prince said, as though choosing his words carefully. We're all busy, Majesty, especially with these imps, I imagine. I did see Dave, though, so that's... He noticed the prince shift in his seat when he said his friend's name, and he immediately regretted it. What was going on between those two? No, he promised Dave he wouldn't pry. You are close with Sir Strider, then? We're friends, if that's what you're asking, Karkat said warily. Prince Diedrich nodded and picked at his plate some more, until he saw Karkat was finished with his. More? He asked. Karkat shook his head. The prince gestured to the waiting servant to take their plates away, then stood up. Best be off. Lord Egbert is expecting us. Karkat stood as well and followed Prince Diedrich out of the castle into a waiting carriage. The prince climbed in first, while Karkat hesitated. I should get my horse, he said. The prince poked his head out of the carriage. It'll be easier for us to talk. I wish to learn more about your fights with the imps before we get to the Egbert estate. Karkat bit his lip, then followed the prince inside. The first several minutes of the ride went in silence, Cervantes anxiously tugging at the ends of his shirt and readjusting his sword, coughing occasionally into a cloth that was slowly growing grayer and grayer as the day went on. Dirk didn't want to overwhelm him with more questions, but maybe they would take his mind off the ride. Plus, he said that's why he wanted the night in with him, so best live up to that. You said you didn't know how many imps you fought, Dirk prodded. Vanta shook his head. No, Majesty. I lost count after the third attack. Dirk raised his eyebrows. Yeah, raised his eyebrows. Do you know how many times you were attacked, at least? Karkat started ticking off on his hands. Twice before the inn, once at the inn, but that was a smaller group. Another 3 to 4 times before the capital. Nothing when I got within 5 miles of it. Troubling that they were so far into the country, but not as troubling as it could be. Dirk was pleased to see the knight's fidgeting had quieted, though. How close were you to the border when you were first attacked? Not close, Majesty. Aradia was still with me. She had me come back after we were attacked. Dirk sat up straight. Aradia? Is she okay? Why didn't she come back with you? She wanted to warn those at the sight of what was happening. Said I would be faster without her anyway. Dirk must have still looked worried because Karkat added, She can handle herself. She saved me in the first fight. Dirk nodded. He knew Aradia could take care of herself. Still. Well, nothing to be done about her decision now. They sat in silence for a few more minutes, and Vantus's nervous energy started up again. Dirk sought his mind for a question that wouldn't push too hard, like he thought he had gotten close to when he asked about Strider. And he cursed himself when what came out was, Why did you choose to become a knight? Vantus looked up at him, not quite glaring, but not happy. Why do people keep asking me that? Simple curiosity, Sir Vantus. You're free not to answer. Definitely pushed him too much. Vantus chewed his lip again. I wanted to protect people. Serve a greater purpose. On my own terms. Some would consider serving others to inherently be on someone else's terms. Karkat shook his head. It's still my choice. I can choose to disobey, to leave. It's not like... He trailed off and looked out the window. It's different, he finished. Dirk didn't press him any further. So this, in the next chapter, probably should have been one chapter, except they were both so fucking long. So, that's where they got split. But, this was definitely chapter part 1, chapter part 2 thing more than anything. But yeah, I just don't want to release... I don't like releasing chapters that's too much more than like 3K. I like short chapters. And hey, it gives me more of a buffer. But yeah, they're finally talking. They haven't really talked like this before. Yeah, I don't think they've held like an actual conversation beyond Dirk just being like, "Oh, you're heading out," or some shit. So, yeah, they're talking. It's only, taken, what are we on, chapter 23? 24. It's only taken them 24 chapters to talk. Like, really have a conversation. Because that's how I do. Oh my gosh. Karkat's voice is something else. I like having them talk, though. I like having conversations. Like, dialogue is great. Chapter 25. In the Know. Prince and guard pay old acquaintances some visits to allocate resources. Oh, and here I say it in the notes. This one should have been tacked on to the end of the last one, but it was getting pretty long. Yeah, and just more about the YouTube readings. They were silent the rest of the way to the city, and once in it, it was just a few turns from the gate to get them to Lord Egbert's estate, a 2-story building surrounded on either side by 2 smaller houses. Their carriage was led in through the gate and parked in front of the door, where Lord Egbert himself was waiting to greet them. Cervantes exited quickly, then stood by the carriage door as Dirk followed him. Lord Egbert smiled widely when he saw Vantus, then bowed deeply to Dirk. My liege. What is my John voice? Fuck. My liege? Whatever. I'll get it. He said, his voice more teasing than serious. Lord Egbert, Dirk replied. Apologies for any interruptions, but this is urgent, as my note indicated. Come now, Dirky boy. Must he be so formal? Mi casa es tu casa, as they say. Come in, come in. Dirk frowned at him, but wasn't actually displeased, as he and Vantus were led inside. He thought perhaps the shock of Cervantes' face was worth it, at least. They were led to a sitting room, and John gestured to a plush love seat for Dirk to sit in, while John sat on a larger couch. Vantus stood next to Dirk, but John gestured for him to sit as well. Come now, Sir Knight. It's just us boys, and you look worse for wear. Have a seat. To both Dirk's and presumably Vantus's discomfort, the seat being gestured to was the other cushion of the love seat. Vantus sat as far to the edge as he could, and Dirk scooted to his edge as well, glaring at John, who seemed to be enjoying watching the two of them squirm. I'm surprised Sir Strider isn't with you, he mused. Usually I can't separate the two for the life of me. Cervantes snorted, and John raised his eyebrows. Something to say, Carcat? No, John, Vantus retorted. Come now, you may speak freely here. I encourage it. From what I hear, it's unlike you to bite your tongue. Dirk had no idea what was going on between them. Fine. I simply think that it isn't me who can't be separated from Dave. Oh. Dirk would file this away for future consideration. John waggled his eyebrows. Jealous? Not on your life. John laughed until Vantus started coughing into his cloth again, and then his eyebrows creased as he looked genuinely concerned. That doesn't seem good, he said. It's why I'm here to see you today, Dirk said. John sighed. And here I thought you just missed me. There are imps in Skya, dimwit, Vantus interrupted. Apparently he was really enjoying this freedom to talk deal. That shut Egbert up, his mouth hanging open slightly. He blinked a few times, looking between Dirk and Vantus. He's not serious, Dirk. Imps? He's very serious, John. Imps. John looked like he wanted to laugh, but he was still shocked. What do you need from me? Whatever knights you can spare to patrol around the city, and resources for any others coming through. They were last seen 5 miles east of here, and I need to know if they get any closer and prevent them from entering. Hold on. Done, John said. I can send 5 on rotation and halt unnecessary trips out that direction as well. Do you know why they're here, or how? Dirk shook his head. It's being looked into, but we just found out the night before last, so it might be some time before we get to the bottom of it. John nodded. I understand. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help. You'll be the first, Dirk said, smirking. Well, I assume I'm not the only stop today. Off to see Ek next? Dirk nodded. Then I won't take up any more of your time teasing the two of you, as fun as it is. Carcat snorted again. Thank you, John. Dirk stood up, and Carcat did as well. Of course, of course. Next time try to see me when it's not an emergency, okay? No promises. John laughed and walked them out to the carriage and waved after them as it left. Lord Sahak lived to the northwest of the city, over near where the tournament was held. Prince Yerzrik was silent for the first few minutes of the trip, then said, So you know John? Carcat wanted to laugh, but thought it best to assume his ability to speak freely was solely in Egbert's sitting room. Only through Dave. The prince looked like he was struggling with something. The two are close, then? He may not be snooping into whatever was going on between the prince and Dave anymore, but he wasn't going to give out more than necessary. You could say that. I see. He looked uncomfortable, and that so wasn't Carcat's problem, but he found himself saying, It's a good thing. They're good for each other. I'm glad to hear it then, the prince said, and he did look somewhat relieved. How long have you been a knight? Still eager to change the subject, though, apparently. I do want to take this moment to say it, because I don't think it's ever going to come up in canon, so this is just like a little side thing for me, for my brain, for me personally. The reason Dirk is uncomfortable here is not just because it's Dave dating John, it's because he totally had a crush on John when they were younger, but at the time John didn't realize he was into dudes, and so that went nowhere, and so Dirk has spent this whole time thinking John was straight. And so it's kind of like a double whammy for him. So, I don't know. That's just me. That's, again, it's not plot relevant. It's probably not going to ever come up. But that's why. That's what's going on. Kirk had thought for a second. 3 years officially. 7 more of training. You started older than most then, from what I hear. Karkat shrugged. There were some older, mostly the second children of nobles trying to do something useful since they can't inherit. But yeah, for those of us raised in the sanctuary, I was one of the oldest starting out. The prince hummed his acknowledgement, but didn't say anything else. Lord Zahak's estate was larger than Egbert's, with a few more small buildings surrounding it on a couple hundred acres of land. A butler was waiting for them at the entrance to the main building and ushered them into the dining room, the table of which was piled with fresh fruits and vegetables. My lord will be here in a moment, the butler said. Please enjoy these refreshments while you wait. He then bowed and left. The prince began idly munching on the offered food, and when he noticed Karkat looking, gestured for him to do so as well. Though his breakfast had been filling enough, it had been a few hours by now, and Karkat didn't say no to free food. If he had had any hesitation before, he sure didn't after seeing the look on Zahak's face when he walked in and saw him eating with the prince. Said prince must have noticed it too, because he said, Is there a problem, Lord Equius? And, that was more familiar than he was with Egbert at first. No, your highness, forgive me. I just didn't expect your guard to be joining you. Wouldn't be much use of a guard if you didn't, would he? Prince Diedrich responded, an honest-to-God smirk playing across his lips. Was he teasing him? No, of course not. How silly of me, your majesty. It is only natural you would use your subjects as you see fit, and you have deemed this one strong enough to be useful for protection, so that is his utmost responsibility now. The last seemed to be more directed at Karkat than it was at the prince. Strangely enough, protection is why I'm here, the prince said. I have use of yours. The noble had been sweating before, like he always was, but there was now a notable sheen across his face. He dabbed his forehead with a handkerchief. Anything, my liege. We have imps in the kingdom. My knights and whatever other nobles can spare will be going on constant patrols. I need your horses around at as many inns and other willing locales across the country as possible for them to be switched out with, to not wear any of the poor beasts down. Imps? Surely you jest. Do you not believe me, Lord Equius? Oh, he was definitely teasing him. Karkat's stomach did a strange flip, and he stopped eating, much more invested in the interaction now. Thank you. I'm glad. I love Equius and Dirk writing together. Like, if I didn't already have this as Dirk Cat Endgame, like, Dirkwius would be a real contender. Because Equius is just so fun to write. So, yeah, I'm real glad you're enjoying this conversation. I need more excuses for them to talk, to be honest. Zahak bowed so low he went beyond bending in half. Of course I believe you, my lord. Please forgive my gross overstep. Please punish me however you see fit to make up for this terrible crime of daring to doubt your word. I don't think that will be necessary. Simply whatever horses you can spare. As you wish, sire. I will get on it post-haste. See that you do, Lord Equius, and send word of your progress. His Majesty rose to leave, and Zahak straightened up. Must you depart so soon, your highness? There is other business to attend to, I'm afraid. Thank you for your hospitality you've shown me and my most trusted knight. I will hear from you soon. Both Karkat and Zahak started at the phrase, most trusted knight, but Karkat was quicker on the uptake and clambered to follow the prince out the door while Lord Zahak stood in the dining room staring after them. Prince Diedrich didn't say anything when they got back in the carriage, even after 10 minutes went by with Karkat awkwardly coughing. So, he finally said. The prince looked at him, one eyebrow slightly raised. He said. Something on your mind, Cervantes? It's none of my business, Karkat said quickly, his stomach twisting again. His Majesty shifted in his seat to more fully face Karkat. Well, now you have me curious. Speak freely. Not needing to be told twice, he immediately asked, "What the fuck is between you and Lord Zahak?" The prince's face split into a grin, and he laughed, and Karkat was reminded of the last moment they had spoken before he left for his patrol. It was such a rare sight. He shifted in his seat and shrugged his shoulders up to his ears. "If there's nothing going on, you can just say so." "Since you were bold enough to ask, I'll answer honestly," Prince Diedrich said, still smiling, if more lightly now. "I will admit there is something of flirtation on my part. He is both attractive and fun to tease, and what else do you really need? But he is otherwise occupied, so to say, and there has never been any real intent behind my actions." Karkat, who was pretending he wasn't blushing furiously, just nodded, the feeling in his gut easing somewhat. "I presume it goes without saying that you're not to speak a word of this to anyone else," the prince said. Karkat nodded again, already wondering what Dave's reaction to this was going to be. Another question was bothering him, though. "Can I still speak freely?" The prince nodded. "Why the fuck did it take you so long to get a guard?" His Majesty shrugged. "Didn't feel like I needed one. Then I started to feel like I was asking to be proven wrong." Something about the way he said it didn't feel true, but Karkat couldn't pin down the feeling enough to prod at it. "I'd say the festival proved that feeling correct," he said instead. The prince absently rubbed the scar on his cheek. "Lucky you were there, then." He wasn't smiling anymore. Karkat took this as his cue to change the topic. "Where are we heading next?" "The Muse's sanctuary." Karkat jumped. "What? Why there?" The prince eyed him. "Recruits. Why? I thought you would enjoy the chance to go back." He shrugged. "Just surprised, I guess." Is all the prince said in response. Cervantes became more and more anxious the closer they got to the sanctuary he spent his later adolescence in, which Dirk found to be curious. He still exited first when the carriage pulled up to the doors and waited for Dirk to exit as well before moving, but as soon as he saw the matron of the sanctuary, a tall, stoutly built, late middle-aged woman, he visibly paled. Dirk had spoken to the matron often enough, and she was a pleasant woman, so he didn't understand the knight's reaction until, "Why, if it isn't little Karkat Fantas!" The matron made it to them in 3 long strides and pinched the man's cheek, beaming all the while. "Hello, Dolorosa," Fantas responded sheepishly. Dolorosa extended her arms wide, and Dirk caught Fantas glance at him for a split second before obliging and hugging her. She wrapped her arms around him and squeezed him to her middle, his head barely reaching her shoulder. Dirk, being a serious and dedicated ruler of Skaya, did not laugh. Okay, he might have chuckled. Okay, he absolutely did, and earned the glare Fantas shot at him from between Dolorosa's arms. Dirk cleared his throat, and Dolorosa released the knight. "My apologies, Your Highness. It's been so long since I've seen you as well." She opened her arms to him. "That won't be Nessa. Okay." It was his turn to be wrapped in her embrace, and Fantas's turn to snicker. He also didn't come up with much higher than her shoulder. Hold on, fucking Karkat's voice is killing me. When he was released, Dirk said, "I'm afraid I am here on rather serious business. If we may go inside?" "Of course." Dolorosa led the way in, and then to a large play area, a handful of children, the oldest maybe 10, crowding around them as soon as they entered. "Who are you?" one asked. "He's fancy," another pointed out. "Is that sword real?" a third asked with awe. "Karkat!" yelled yet another screamed. "Now, children, the prince—" "That's the prince!" the last one shrieked. "Is here on important business. Please give us a moment to talk." The 5 nodded solemnly, but were also fidgeting in place. Dolorosa sighed affectionately. "Karkat's here. Would you mind? The others are watching the older children out back." "Fine," Cervantes grumbled. "Come on, kiddos," he said more loudly, squatting down and holding his arms out stiff to his sides. "Grab on." The child who had recognized him and the other one who had screamed grabbed on eagerly and squealed in delight as Vanta stood back up and twirled around, the pair swinging freely off his arms. "He acts like he hates it, but he's wonderful with the little ones," Dolorosa whispered to Dirk conspiratorially. Dirk broke his gaze away and cleared his throat again, ignoring the odd tightness in his chest. "It's the older ones that bring me here today." She quirked an eyebrow at him. "Imsur and Skaya. None have reached the capital, as far as we know, but if there are any of your pages who are close to taking the test to join the Knights, I could use them as extra patrols in it, just as a precaution." Dolorosa eyed him. "You want to send my children against imps?" "Hopefully not. It's just a precaution," he said again. "I'm trying to prevent them from getting into the city in the first place." She sighed and drew a hand through her short bob of hair. "Very well. I have a few who are almost ready to test. I can send them to the city. When do you need them?" "As soon as you can spare them." "Tomorrow, then." "Thank you, Matron Dolorosa. Send them to Lord Egbert. He'll know what to do with them." She nodded. "Well, if that is all." "It is," Dirk confirmed. Again! The three children, not currently latched onto Vantas, were screaming. Dolorosa clapped once in a way that echoed in the room. They immediately stopped and turned toward her expectantly, including Vantas, much to Dirk's amusement. "Our guests must be leaving now, children," she said. A chorus of "ahs" rang out. She nodded sadly with them. "They have important business to attend to, and we must leave them to it. Say goodbye." The chorus was replaced by "byes" and "bye, Carcat," and Vantas's arms were released. He ruffled the hair of the last who had been on him and then followed Dirk out into the carriage, but not before Dolorosa squeezed another hug out of him, one Dirk was thankfully able to avoid. "Come visit more often. Dave comes at least once a month." "Yes, matron," Vanta said, and Dirk was quite certain that was not the word he was originally going to use for her. Dirk, again, being a very serious and dedicated ruler, did not laugh. It wasn't until they were both seated and the carriage took off that Dirk realized how tired Cervantes looked. He supposed it had been a very active day, especially with his cough. It was good, then, that they were set to go back to the castle, even though they still had a couple more hours of daylight. His knight needed more rest. Carcat was blessedly dismissed as soon as they reached the castle, and he made a beeline to his room, too tired to even grab a bite to eat for dinner. He stripped out of most of his outer clothes, leaving on one of his loose shirts, and crawled into bed, falling asleep almost immediately. When he woke with a start, the sun had long since set. Adrenaline was pumping in his veins, and he tried to calm himself and take stock of what was going on. He didn't remember a bad dream to jolt him awake. Then he heard it. A scream. Prince Deirdric's scream. He bolted out of bed, grabbed his sword, and burst into the adjoining room with it at the ready. But there was no one else in the room. The prince was still in bed. Another scream came from the bed. "Majesty?" Carcat asked. He cautiously walked over to the prince's bedside. Prince Deirdric was tossing and turning and groaning and sweating and mumbling words Carcat couldn't make out. He curled in on himself and cried out again. "Majesty?" Carcat repeated. He reached out, hand hesitating over the prince's shoulder. Then the prince's breathing calmed, and Carcat watched his muscles loosen. He stood there, hand still hovering, for another few minutes, but the prince didn't make any more noise. So Carcat left him and went back to his own room and fell back into a troubled sleep. Yes, Carcat was going to say Mom, and that's adorable. Yeah, this chapter was so much fun to write. For one, I started this chapter knowing that they were going to see John, obviously, and Equius. But then I'm like, just two people didn't seem like enough. Who else can they go see? And then I realized. And so, yeah, when I started writing this chapter, I did not know they were going to go see Dolorosa. And then they did, and it was great, and I love it. And, yeah, Carcat being around the Dolorosa is very cute. But we have been going for about an hour, so I think that's about it. But a lot of stuff has happened. So much stuff has happened, so that's very exciting. Shit is going down. The action has officially sort of begun. We got Dirk and Karkat talking. We got feelings being stirred up. We got another Equius conversation. We got more John. I love writing John too. These characters are so fucking fun to write. But yeah. So it is a lot of fun. And Karkat kills my throat. So Karkat isn't allowed to talk anymore. He is going to come down with an injury or a curse where he just can't talk. Because I hate it. Nah, it's fun. It's fun voicing Karkat. It's just, I can't do it more than an hour for sure. But yeah, so we will start chapter 26 next time. There are currently 31 chapters up. So it's only going to be another like 3 or 4 more of these before we're caught up, depending on how long it takes me. But yeah, thank you guys for joining me. Always talk to me about any thoughts you have about this work, because I love talking about it, and I have so many thoughts about it all the time. I'm actually doing a Patreon reward that they're going to get, that all patrons are going to get tomorrow, where I'm going through and I'm printing off each chapter double spaced, and I'm writing like little comments between the lines about shit, because I just have so much I want to say about this fic, because I love it so much. But I'm also like continuing to write the fic. It's just I also have stuff to say. So that's my plan. I need to start writing the next chapter. I don't know if it'll be up for Monday, so I might switch to Wednesday releases until I get back on a schedule, because times are terrible, and pandemic times don't make for good writing, and you know how things go. But yeah, thank you guys for joining me. It's been fun. I like seeing your reactions to shit. I like that you like Equius and Dirt conversation, because I like writing Equius. I'm always afraid I'm writing him wrong, but I love writing him because he's very fun. But yeah, and I will see you guys next time I stream, which who knows when that will be. It'll be tomorrow or next week or a month from now. It won't be a month from now. You know how it is. But yeah, I'm gonna go rest my voice instead of continuing to talk. Bye-bye!